She said, I'll do anything, just let me go. And she even offered oral sex. So, and I had her give me oral sex. She gave me oral sex. As I ejaculated, it got on her shirt and some on her pants.
I've been running my channel for about a month and a half now, diving deep into stories that are often dark and heavy. Over time, you start to build a kind of armor against the grim details. Desensitization creeps in as a way to cope. But every once in a while, a case comes along that shatters that armor, piercing straight through to your heart. It leaves you shaken, angry, and grieving for people you've never met. The story of Channon Christian and Christopher Newsom is one of those cases. A tragedy so brutal, so utterly despicable that it's impossible to process without feeling a deep ache for their families and the lives stolen so cruelly.
The photograph was taken as is when the body arrived to the office and without any prior cleaning. So this is just to show where the blood is coming from. This is the blood that is coming from the injury to the anogenital region. There is bruising around the anus. There is bruising around the vagina, but most importantly, there's extensive bruising, it's not actually almost, but it's hematoma formation in the skin around that anogenital. The skin is already breaking down, so this is not just your usual intercourse or rape. This is much more than that.
It was the evening of January 6, 2007 in Knoxville, Tennessee. Channon Christian, 21, and Christopher Newsom, 23, were a young couple in the early, hopeful stages of their relationship. They had planned a simple but special night. Dinner together, followed by a friend's party. Chris, a talented baseball player with a warm smile, was the kind of person everyone loved. Charismatic, kind, and hardworking. He earned a living as a carpenter, pouring his energy into building things, creating something lasting. Channon, a sociology student at the University of Tennessee, was vibrant and driven. She had a passion for golf, a sport that brought her joy, and a deep care for understanding people and the world around her. They were young, full of dreams, and just starting to write their story together. That evening, Channon headed to a friend's apartment to get ready for their date. Chris was running a little late, so Channon told her friend to go ahead to the party without her. "I'll wait for Chris," she said, her voice likely carrying that mix of excitement and anticipation you feel when you're about to see someone special. Around 8 p.m., her friend left for the party, leaving Channon alone in the apartment complex to wait for Chris. But hours passed, and the couple never showed up at the party. Their friends started to worry. Calls went unanswered, texts went unread. By 11 p.m., two of Chris's friends couldn't shake their unease and drove to the apartment complex where Channon had been waiting. There, in the parking lot, they found Chris's truck, but Shannon's Toyota 4Runner was gone. Something felt terribly wrong. The next morning, January 7, Shannon's mother, Dina Christian, woke up with a knot in her stomach. Her daughter hadn't come home. She wasn't answering her phone. As a mother, that instinctual dread, the kind that tells you something is off, must have been overwhelming. Then the call started coming. Shannon's best friend reached out, her voice trembling to say the couple never made it to the party and that her SUV was missing. Moments later, Shannon's boss called, concerned because she hadn't shown up for her shift at work, a rarity for someone as responsible as Channon. Dina's worst fears were taking shape. She dialed 911, her heart pounding, to report Channon and Chris missing. But because both were adults, the police explained they couldn't act until 24 hours had passed. For Dina, those hours must have felt like an eternity, each minute stretching out with agonizing uncertainty. Unable to just sit and wait, the families of Channon and Chris took action. They reached out to Shannon's mobile phone provider, desperate for any clue. The provider traced her phone's last signal to a tower on Cherry Street, a rough part of Knoxville known for its high crime rate. It was the kind of place locals described as somewhere you didn't go unless you lived there or were looking for trouble. With hope and dread intertwined, their loved ones scoured the Cherry Street area. That's when they found Shannon's Toyota 4Runner, abandoned in a parking lot. But the SUV told a troubling story. Channon was meticulous about her vehicle, keeping it spotless, yet the floor was caked with mud. The driver's seat was pushed back so far that someone of Shannon's petite stature couldn't have driven it. Personal touches, photos of her family and friends, an iPad, a cherished teddy bear were missing. Most unsettling, they found a pack of cigarettes, despite neither Channon nor Chris being smokers. It was clear something sinister had happened. The police took over, analyzing the SUV and finding fingerprints that led them to an address just 2 blocks away, 2316 Chipman Street. Those prints belonged to LaMarcus Davidson, a man with a history of carjacking who had recently been released from prison. What the authorities would uncover next would reveal the horrifying reality of what happened to Channon and Chris, a nightmare no one could have imagined. On January 7th, a railroad worker made a gruesome discovery near some train tracks not far from Chipman Street. It was Chris's body, wrapped in a comforter with a sweatshirt tied tightly around his head. His own socks had been used to gag him, his ankles bound with his belt and his hands secured behind his back. His feet, bare and covered in mud, told the story of being forced to walk to his death. He had been shot multiple times in what investigators described as an execution-style killing. His body had been doused in gasoline and set on fire in a cruel attempt to destroy evidence. Semen was found on his body, but the fire had obliterated any chance of identifying the DNA. The brutality was unimaginable, and for Chris's family, the pain of learning this must have been unbearable. To piece together the events, we need to go back to that night at the apartment complex. Chris had arrived to pick up Channon, and the two were sharing a quiet moment outside her SUV. They were talking, holding each other, maybe stealing a kiss, completely unaware they were being watched. A group of carjackers, LaMarcus Davidson, George Giovanni Thomas, LaTalvis Tobbins, Vanessa Lynn Coleman, and Eric Boyd, had set their sights on Channon's SUV. In a flash, the couple's world turned to terror as guns were pointed at their heads. The group had come for the vehicle, but when headlights from another car swept through the parking lot, the carjackers panicked. Fearing they'd be seen, they forced Channon and Chris into the SUV at gunpoint and sped off to the house on Chipman Street, a rundown place near a waste management facility. The 5 individuals involved were a volatile group, each with their own struggles and a reputation for trouble. Davidson, fresh out of prison and on parole for prior carjackings, was frustrated by his lack of money and saw stealing a car as a way out. That night, they targeted Channon and Chris, setting off a chain of events that would spiral into unimaginable horror. At the house, Chris was the first to suffer. In front of Channon, who was forced to watch, he was brutally beaten and sexually assaulted. The cruelty of making her witness this is heart-wrenching to even think about. Afterward, they took Chris to the nearby railroad tracks. Davidson pushed Thomas to pull the trigger, and Thomas fired shots into Chris's neck and back, leaving him paralyzed but alive, prolonging his agony. As Chris lay helpless on the ground, Davidson delivered a final fatal shot to his head. To cover their tracks, they wrapped his body in a comforter, poured gasoline on him, and set him ablaze. The sheer inhumanity of it is enough to make your stomach turn and your heart ache for a young man who deserves so much better. She was alone with Channon multiple times, opportunities where she could have helped or called for help. Instead, she did nothing beyond occasionally bringing Channon water, a hollow gesture in the face of such brutality. Channon was strangled and beaten until she lost consciousness, though she was still clinging to life. In a final act of depravity, Davidson poured bleach down her throat and inside her body to destroy evidence. They bound her in a fetal position, wrapped her in 5 trash bags, and placed a shopping bag over her head before stuffing her into a kitchen trash can. There, Channon slowly suffocated, her eyes open in her final moments. The image of her suffering like that is haunting, a stark reminder of the evil some are capable of. On January 9th, police searched 2316 Chipman Street and found Channon's body in the trash can, a discovery that must have broken the hearts of everyone involved. Her missing belongings, photos, iPad, teddy bear were scattered around the house. Davidson's fingerprints were all over the trash bags, and his and Cobbin's DNA was found on Channon's jeans and sweater. Bullet casings in the house matched those used to kill Chris, tying the crimes together. The evidence was overwhelming. 2 days later, on January 11, all 5 suspects were arrested. A journal found in the house, written in Coleman's handwriting, offered a chilling glimpse into her mindset. She described the night as,
"This night was one of a kind. We stayed with a crackhead. That is cool as hell. It snowed a bit, but it already melted. Let's talk about adventures. I had one hell of an adventure since I've been in a big TN. It's a crazy world these days, but I love the fun adventures and the lessons that I've learned. It's going to be a long, interesting year."
Reading those words, knowing what she was complicit in, is infuriating and heartbreaking. Eric Boyd was convicted as an accessory to a fatal carjacking and sentenced to a maximum of 18 years in federal prison. Letalvis Cobbins was found guilty of murder and received life without parole. Lamarcus Davidson was convicted and the jury sentenced him to death in 2016. The judge, visibly shaken, called the case one of the most outrageously cruel and inhumane he'd ever seen, adding that no sentence could fully capture the gravity of their actions. George Thomas was also convicted on multiple counts and sentenced to life without parole. Vanessa Coleman was acquitted of first-degree murder, but convicted on lesser charges, receiving a 53-year sentence. In an act of compassion, the waste management company near the crime scene purchased the Chipman Street property, demolished the house, and transformed it into a memorial for Channon and Chris, a small gesture to honor 2 lives cut short. But the question lingers: why? Why did this group commit such atrocities? Some believe it was racially motivated, as the victims were white and the perpetrators black, with possible resentment fueling their actions. Others argue it started as a carjacking that escalated into a depraved act of torture and murder, driven by a twisted sense of power and control. Whatever the motive, nothing can justify the pain inflicted on Channon, Chris, and their loved ones. As I sit here recounting this story, I can't help but think of the families left behind, forever changed by this loss. Channon and Chris were more than victims. They were people with passions, dreams, and futures stolen from them. Their story reminds us to hold our loved ones close, to cherish the moments we have, and to never take safety for granted. It's a story that breaks your heart, but it's one we need to tell, to honor their memory and to remind us all of the fragility of life. And that's it for today's case. How did you feel about this one? Let me know in the comments. Did anything stand out to you or shock you the most? And if there's anything I can do to make these videos better, drop your thoughts below. I am always looking to improve. Also, if you haven't already, check out my last video on the horrifying case of Chalino Sanchez. It's one of the most chilling stories I've covered, and honestly, it'll stay with you. Until next time, stay safe.